for Warhol to be crying. Too many teardrops. Welcome to today's edition of LaLumiNation. I'm Jimi LaLumia, and with me is co-hostess Susan Faber Gaide. And we are still in COVID mode, which is why Susan is in that lovely futuristic set, and I'm sitting on my bed in El Casa LaLumia. And today we have a very special guest, which I'm very happy to introduce. A friend of mine for many years is going to share past, present, and future with us. A denizen from the get-go of Max's Kansas City and Manhattan, New York, Yvonne Sewall Ruskin. Yvonne, are you there?
I am here and ready to go.
Yes, you are.
Hi, Yvonne.
And you're looking divine. Looking
ready
divine. How are you?
With the stories.
How are you? How are you today? How are things with COVID? Is that affecting you?
I'm in Kingston, New York. And besides the fact that today, as we all know, was very humid and hot, I must say, so far so good in regard to COVID-19. We never want to peak too soon, as I always say, but things up here are beginning to open up.
Okay.
And, it feels starting, I've actually been doing a fair amount of outside dining.
Okay.
Restaurants, which really feels great because there were several months of real isolation, and but you still have to wear a mask. You still have to really be vigilant, I believe, and
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And
absolutely. Yeah.
There are unfortunately a lot of people who don't understand why wearing the mask is important and why it's just simple common courtesy and respect to your fellow citizen. Because the only way this virus gets stopped is if it can't jump from human to human. So it's really important to wear the mask. You have to stop feeding it. Right.
And the way you stop feeding it is following the precautions.
Exactly.
And we're not a political show. And we don't go into politics, but unfortunately, we'll simply say that some people think they're making a statement. And then some people, as we've seen online, go ahead and die. And if that's their choice to make a statement, if they think, God bless,
Yeah.
But we're not here to talk about that today. We're here to talk about a decades-long association with the very first, what I consider, and if I'm wrong, I will stand corrected, the very first truly underground New York City or anywhere else in America nightclub, Max's Kansas City. And Yvonne mentioned to me the other day about Bridget Berlin, who was one of the many from the early days of Max's, and unfortunately, many have gone that route in recent times. But Yvonne, what is your earliest memories of Max's Kansas City, circa, I guess, 65, 67? You tell us.
I was still in college. I was still in college. Well, first of all, I didn't even know Mickey. I actually, in college, had been to the Ninth Circle via a sister of a friend who I went to college with. We went there, and it was a very interesting place because they had the big barrels of peanuts, and they had the sawdust on the floor so you could eat the peanuts and throw, the peanut shells on the floor. But I had no idea that who Mickey Ruskin was, or that he even owned the place. It was just a fun place to go. She said, if you're going to the Village, go to the Ninth Circle. So I graduated, and then Mickey opened after he, sold the Ninth Circle to his partner, Bobby Crivet. He went away for a year with his then wife, Sharon, and traveled Europe. And then came back and wanted to open another place, and found this place on Park Avenue South between 17th and 18th that actually was a luncheonette at the time. And he wanted to open further down, but there was a clause in the contract when he sold to Bobby Cribbett that said, you can't, no competition clause. So he ended up opening, and he got a very good deal on the place in December of 65. Now, I was still in college. I graduated college in 67. So I actually went out to Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco for the Summer of Love, and sat up on Hippie Hill with all the other flower children. And then, you know, when I was running out of money, my vision was that I wanted to travel for a year before I really decided what I wanted to do. But I really didn't have the money to travel. So my vision was that I would waitress for a year, because that's what I did in college. And I actually hitchhiked back with someone to New York City and started looking for a waitressing job, and really didn't know where I should go. You know, these ended up in these places that were topless and bottomless, and you know, I said, no, I have no idea where. So I went to visit a friend who had lived there for a while, who was going to Pratt Institute, and he said, you got to go to this place called Max's Kansas City. This is the place to be, where the waitresses are treated like stars and make lots of money. And I said, I really want to go there. And he mentioned to me that he and I went to high school in Westport, Connecticut, had a high school friend that was working there. She was a couple of years older, but he said, the way you're going to get in is to use her name. That's the way, because he said, you know, everybody wants to work at Max's. So I followed his directions in terms of, I called up and said, you know, I know so-and-so, and I really like to get an interview as a waitress. And that got me in the door. And so I went over there. This was like August of 67. And I went over there and I looked around and the whole area, and saw this big marquee that said Max's Kansas City steak, lobster, and chickpeas. And I'm saying, what the hell are chickpeas? I had no idea. Did you know what chickpeas were?
Absolutely not.
Did you know?
Oh yeah, they were a staple in my family. Yeah.
Oh, and yours, yeah. Jim?
I had never heard of them.
I
thought it was a fabricated thing. I didn't even think it was a real thing.
I honestly didn't know what chickpeas were, but anyway, and so to kind of move it forward here, I came a little bit early. You usually came between 3 and 4. That is when they interviewed you for a waitressing job. Now, remember, I had never even seen the place before, and I wanted to kind of check out the area, so I came early, and I'm standing out front, kind of just scoping the area out, and I see this man coming from 18th Street with this suit on, with this big flowered tie, and his hair hanging over his eye, with this shiny black hair, and his pant leg a little bit short. And he was so fascinating looking at me. He looked like a Ichabod Crane character, you know. So I watched him with my eyes, and he actually went past Max's and went into, there was a bank on the corner, a chemical bank right on the corner of 17th Street. That is now the W Hotel. So
okay.
Then I thought, okay, I'll go into Max's and then check it out. So I went in, and there's this huge, you go in the bottom floor, and it just seemed like, but truthfully, don't forget, I used to go to like the Village in the city, but like the Dugout or places like that in Greenwich Village. This place was huge. I mean, I had never seen a place like this. It just went on forever. And so I, walked around for a little bit and was kind of checking it out. And then there was a cashier And I up front, and I said to the cashier, you know, I'm here for the waitressing job for the interview. And she said, you have to go up 2 flights of stairs. And then you walk into a, you know, kind of a big area, and you sit there and you wait till your turn. You wait your turn. I wasn't the only one. So I did that. I went upstairs and sat there and waited. And I was really dressed to the nines because I had now been to several places and I really needed this job. I mean, I was running out of funds, you know. I was only 21 years old, you know. And so anyway, finally my name is called, and needless to say, you're really kind of nervous, you know. And I go back. You have to go all the way back to the very back to this office. And I walked in there, and there's the man sitting at the desk who was the man that I saw walking down the street that looked like a distinguished Ichabod Crane. I went, oh my God. Anyway, and you know, Mickey would ask you all, I didn't know who he was, don't forget. I had no idea who anybody was. I didn't know what his position was. I just thought maybe he's this manager that interviews people. What did I know? I didn't, you know, I had never had a job in New York City. I was in college, you know, and I grew up in a suburb. So he asks you all kinds of questions, like, you know, and of course I mentioned that I had gone to school with Patsy because Patsy, her family, she was a trust fund child. And so I think he was thinking, oh, Westport, Connecticut, trust fund. Anyway, and so he would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And why are you here? And why do you think you should get, you know, all these different questions. And anyway, it went on for quite a while, and there was really a very strong connection between him and I. I always say I think it's because we looked alike, you know, and we were both narcissistic. I don't know. So anyway, and at the end he said, I think, you know, he said, I don't know, you seem a little too flighty. I'm really having hesitations about this. And I said, because, you know, I'm kind of a very upbeat type of personality, and people could get that impression. And I said, make no mistake, I'm a very focused, single-minded person. And so I think I said something like, why don't you hire me as your private secretary or something? And so he said, anyway, there was a lot of sparks flying over this interview, I have to tell you. And then he said, okay, I'm going to give you a chance. You have to trail for 2 nights. You don't get paid. And he hands you this booklet that you have to read that has all the rules in it. And I was so excited. And I actually, this is a true story, I went home, and my sister and I were sharing an apartment way over on West 20th Street off of 7th Avenue. And I said, I'm so excited. I just got his job at the most famous place in downtown Manhattan, this place called Max's Kansas City. And I said, I just met the man who's going to be the father of my children.
Wow.
Wow.
The beginning of my journey at Max's Kansas City.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a true New York story. That's
for sure.
Really,
that's a true
that is so New York.
Oh,
so
yeah.
New York.
Yeah.
Now the underground
yeah,
at that point was all the way downtown, whereas Max's with the Park Avenue and the 17th Street, it was not quite out of downtown, but it wasn't really. It was kind of like and the proximity to the factory at that time, I think, was right down the block, right?
Well,
Warhol's factory?
Well, you know where Max's was, and then there was
Yes.
The square was right there. At the time, you know,
right.
that was really still like a junkie a park. It was still a park where people would, you know, there were a lot of addicts hanging out in that
right.
park. It hadn't been cleaned up yet.
Right.
But because
exactly.
Warhol, you know, don't forget it opened, this was 67 now. It opened in December of 75. So we're almost a year and a half into it where it was on fire. I mean, that
right.
place was packed all the time. And Warhol,
I just wanted to correct you, even because you said 75, and I know you meant to say 65.
I did. I meant 65.
It opened. Yes.
I meant 65, yeah. And so
Right.
actually Warhol, because he used to have his lunch meetings there all the time, moved his factory downtown on Union Square, which was really not quite across the street from Max's, but perpendicular, okay? So that he can really walk over with all of his superstars and his entourage of the factory to hang out at Max's Kansas City at night. And the back room, the infamous back room of Max's Kansas City, really became the Warhol room. Now, before him, it was Joan Baez was the one person who hung out there a little bit, but it didn't have any identity until Warhol came along. It was just a room in the back.
And that certainly helped with publicity for the club, because Max's then became associated with the Warhol crowd,
Yes.
just as that was really starting to get press attention, which of course benefited the Warhol crowd and it benefited Max's. And you were right in the thick of it by that point, correct? You were working there.
I was waitressing, yes. But also, what Mickey didn't know when he got that place is that a lot of artists and fashion photographers and Albert Grossman, who managed Dylan and Joplin and the band and Paul Butterfield and several other people, lived at Gramercy Park and had an office there, even though he also had an office upstate, but he had an office there. But all these fashion photographers had their studios on Broadway and on Fifth Avenue, which wasn't that far. And then artists had lofts there and poets. And so they discovered this place and they started of course, the fashion photographers started bringing the models. And of course, where you have models, all these other people come, and then the artists started coming. And Danny Fields, who, I'm not sure if Danny went to the Ninth Circle and hung out there, but he really created, because he was, involved with the record business as a record company executive and also as a publicist. And he brought the music scene actually to that back room of Max's. So
in the mid-60s, yeah.
Yeah.
In the mid-60s, Danny was editing Date Book magazine. I think it was Date Book, because he ran the infamous interview with John Lennon, where John said, "We're bigger than Christ." And that was, I think, Danny's first claim to fame with Date Book, which was competing. Yeah, that was competing with 16 magazine, which Danny then went on to edit 16 magazine when Gloria Stavers became my mentoress, my first champion, the late Gloria Stavers. Danny took over 16 from her. So he was right in the thick of all of that at that period of time.
Yeah, but then...
And he was a great advocate of Max's, always.
But then he started working for Elektra Records. And
Right.
Yeah, and he would bring in... Not only did he bring in songs for the jukebox, but I was a big music person, so I would also go with Mickey to the record store and choose songs. He was into country music, so he relied on other people. I mean, the great thing about Max is, besides the diversity of the different ages, it was interracial and intergenerational, and the mix was just phenomenal. I mean, for a waitress, it was really bedlam, I have to say, because it was so busy all the time. And when you were new, they wanted to see if you were going to last. So they would put you in that back room with all of Warhol's people, not to be disparaging, but most of who were on drugs and didn't eat. And they had you running all night long for a baked potato or the big salad where everybody shared the salad. And then they would sign their name to Andy's bill. So while all the other waitresses were making $100 a night, you came home with, like, if you were lucky, $30 a night. So we used to call that the punishment room. Yeah. But there were people like Deborah Harry who came after me who had a reason to be back there. There were certain people that liked being back there because it had a purpose for them. Had no purpose for me because I was looking to make money to travel. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they wanted to network. They wanted to make connections. Exactly. Yeah.
And did you go to there too? Did you go to that back room back then?
I never. No. I was actually in the late 60s. I was still in high school.
Oh.
And by the early I was reading about it though. I was ravenously devouring the Village Voice every week and just envisioning all of these people that I would read about, like Holly Woodlawn and Wayne County, and all of whom, as you know, I eventually caught up with, and they caught up with me, and with yourself, and as I did with you and everybody else. But at that time, I was all the way out in the sticks on Long Island, just reading about all of that and visualizing all of it. But I did realize that was the epicenter of what was to become the underground. Prior to that, I don't remember hearing of anything that took on the iconic nature of Max's as far as the world of art, the world of film, the world of music, the world of being hip, the hipness factor. That was all Max's. That was all of you that were there at that time. There was nothing like that before. And everything that followed, Max's was that role model as far as I was concerned. And continued, and continues to be iconic up to this point. Because one of the things, because I know we are not here for hours, I do want Yvonne to explain about something that's very near and dear to her heart, which is the nonprofit for artists in Max's name, which she has been a patroness from day one when she first announced it. And I wonder if you could elaborate on that just a bit so that we don't suddenly we're out of time. I think that's very important.
Well, I so appreciate that because we all really, including you, have been the MC over the years in many of our events. All the teamwork that has kept it going all these years. But, because Mickey was a huge patron of the arts, and I think one of the ways he and I both connected, we connected on many levels. I will end up saying, yes, we did end up together, and yes, we do have children. So, fantasies do come true. I don't care what anybody says.
And well-deserved. Well-deserved.
Anyway, but because he was a huge patron of the arts and really a philanthropist, and I too was, in my own way, even when I met him, even in college I was. So it was sort of my vision to carry on the legacy. I felt that there was really nobody that was carrying on the legacy. And I decided to start this nonprofit for artists in need. Also, I had a crooked financial advisor, that gambled. I sold my loft and moved to Europe for a period of time, thinking I was never going to have to work again in my life, but had a crooked financial advisor, so I was forced back to New York, and I had also been in a dispute over the trademark. But all of a sudden, I get this letter from my attorney saying, "You won. The name is yours." That was when I was in that dispute with Tommy Dean. And I had walked away from that dispute. I said, he can have it. I'm gone. I'm selling my loft. I'm going to Europe, going to live the rest of my life in a happy,
I remember.
But then I had this crooked financial advisor. So I think also the universe had different plans for me. So when I got back, I get this letter from my attorney saying, "You won. The name is yours." So I said, okay, I am supposed to do something good with this name to carry on the legacy. That's why it was given to me, because I walked away from it. And that's when I decided to start the nonprofit for artists in need. So what we do, we are twofold. We provide emergency relief for individuals in the arts in crisis, for housing, medical, and legal aid. We give one-time grants if you live in New York State, if you're a resident of New York State, or you were connected to Max's in any way. We give one-time grants of $1,000. between 500 and 1,000, depending upon your situation, for housing, medical, and legal aid. And we also give a youth called the Max's Hot Records Award, a youth grant every year. Because I'm in a community of upstate New York, we really try to be part of the community. So that grant usually goes to a high school student in any part of the Hudson Valley. We give to all different forms of the arts, different ethnicities. We try to give to those minorities whose family might not be able to send them to a summer program in the arts. So we provide a $500 grant for a student to attend a summer program in the arts if they have an interest in the arts, to kind of further their interest in their education. And if we have the funds, we give 2 grants. This year we're giving 2 grants because we had been donated $1,000 for that particular purpose. So that is what and obviously with COVID-19, we were absolutely inundated with applications. And so truthfully, I have been spending most of my time now writing my own grant proposals to other organizations to bring in more funding so we can, in fact, continue to help those impacted by COVID-19.
And so if anyone wants to participate, what do they do? How do they
go to,
if they want to donate a couple of bucks?
They go to maxiskansascity.org, and there's a donate button on every page. And we're just starting the beginning stages of development of a virtual fundraiser. However, that's still in the development stages. We're hoping that we'll be able to put it together, and that should be in mid-September. We're now just working on the platform to make sure that we can actually do what we envision.
All right, and Susan, I thought I heard Mark interjecting. Was that my imagination or someone trying to speak?
We have extra time.
We have extra time.
We have extra time. Zoom gave us a gift. They lifted the 40-minute restriction.
Wow.
Wow. They must know about the nonprofit. That's great.
They must.
So one other thing I want to ask about, and something I was very flattered to be incorporated into, which is the book High on Rebellion, Inside the Underground at Max's Kansas City by Yvonne. The current status is as an ebook?
Yes.
Yes. And are there any chances of a reprint, or is that
is on? It's an ebook on Open Road Digital Media. But I have to be honest. I mean, of course, I want people to get the ebook, but I also say that on Amazon, it's going to be a cult book eventually. That particular edition, one will never be able to get again. Because
it was brilliant. It was just so exciting. Yeah.
So that you can get a used copy, which isn't so terrible, on Amazon. But there is also, if you want to sit and read something on the subway or whatever, it definitely is an ebook. But I own all the rights. So given that, and by the grace of God, we will see this documentary, hopefully sooner than later. Then I will be able to republish that book because I own all the rights. Yeah, and there's only a period of time where I do have an agent on the book where we have a contract.
Wow. Okay. So there is still hope. Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. And thanks for mentioning.
So did we overstay our time? Where are we with the time, folks?
Oh, we have about another, I'd say like 15 minutes.
Okay. Susan, did you want to ask any?
Jim? Tell one of your stories. How did you get to Max's?
Well, I got to Max's by becoming a writer. And I became a writer, which I've explained to people many times, because I did not really have money as a kid. It was really not available to me. I was fascinated with music and what have you. And I wrote an article for my high school paper about a new album that was called Jesus Christ Superstar, which was a brand new album. It was only an album at the time. There was no plans for a play or what have you. And the English teacher said, why don't you send that to the record company? And I said, why would I do that? And he said, they might want to quote you and they might send you more records. So I did. And they did. I suddenly wound up while in high school on the mailing list of every record company in America.
Wow.
And suddenly my house was getting inundated with boxes of records. My mom thought I was going to go broke, but I explained to her they're free. And she said, nothing in life is free. And I said, you're right, Ma. Nothing in life is free. I write a review of this record. People go out and buy it and spend their money. I earned my right to that free record. So you're right, Ma. Nothing is free, including my opinion. So from there, I started writing reviews of shows and being invited by the labels to places, including Max's Kansas City. I'll never forget, because when I became a manager in the early 70s at Sam Goody's record chain in retail, I was invited to see a band called Steely Dan, who were brand new. They had one hit single out called Do It Again, and they played Max's. And the kids that worked for me years later at Sam Goody were enthralled by the fact that I saw Steely Dan at such a venue. It was not like a gigantic venue. It was the venue where Bruce Springsteen and Bob Marley and the Wailers and everybody that you could imagine cut their teeth and got their deals from and came up through the ranks from. And so I was there primarily as a participant and got to know Yvonne years later through Flavia and Bernard Stolman at ESP Disc when I had a Jane County album released on ESP, and Yvonne was starting to put the idea of the book together. And that's when she and I really put our heads together, correct, Yvonne, around that period of time. And we became very close, and we remained in contact and have worked on a million projects together right up to and including this moment right here. And it's always been an honor and a thrill to work alongside her, because she is a part of New York history and a player in it. And but yeah, that was my involvement at Max's until in the second generation of Max's, under the Tommy Dean era, that I formed the Psychotic Frogs and started cutting records and became a Max's band, which if anyone had ever told me when I was a little kid reading about this place that I would be playing there, headlining there, I would have been like, get the hell out of here. But you know what? As Yvonne said, dreams do come true.
Right.
And they do. And when it's something that you love, just as what we do with this show, just as everything that Yvonne does, you go for it, and things do happen if you are earnest and you're determined, and if you have something to offer. And so I've been led to believe occasionally that I have something to offer. And part of that is finding diamonds that we can invite onto this program, like Yvonne Ruskin, who has many tales to tell, and people should go and get the ebook of High on Rebellion, Inside the Underground at Max's Kansas City, on Amazon or wherever you get ebooks. And Yvonne, is there a spoken word version of that yet? Is there an audible version of that? An audio?
Not yet.
Do you want to do one? Are you going to do one? Well, actually, though, you would need all those because of the way.
I've been so busy with the nonprofit and truthfully keeping it afloat. It really, because I wear a lot of hats, as you know, and really keeping the energy of the film alive. You know. Well,
yes. Well, that's priority. That's priority.
Stops.
Yes.
But I believe that we will complete that. I believe.
And actually, now that I'm thinking about the book and the format of the book is all of our voices, including myself, where our names appear. So actually, maybe that's not quite as plausible, unless you do all the female voices and I do all the male voices. Maybe, I don't know. We could,
we can work it out, Jimmy. We can work it out.
What about Susan?
There you go.
Did Susan ever go to Max's?
No, I was born in 1960, so in the late 60s, I was still way underage.
Right.
But I do have a very funny story about Jimmy. The first time I ever met Jimmy in person was at a Max's Kansas City project event, concert. He was emceeing. That, I believe, was 2006. Okay. So now a few years later, my father ends up in the Long Island State Veterans Home, where Jimi spends a goodly portion of every week of his life helping our nation's veterans. And I go to see my father one night, and he says to me, I had the best person helping me today. And he says to me, his name was James. I'm like, okay. I'm thinking, who's James? You know what I mean? And I said to him, does he have a last name? And he says to me, oh, I can't. It was la something. And I said to him, jokingly, I said, oh, it couldn't possibly be Jimi LaLumia. And he was like, that's it. I said, no, Daddy, no.
That's so funny.
You don't understand who Jimi is. And I started explaining to him about Jimi and Max's Kansas City. And my father says to me, I know what Max's Kansas City was. I spent a lot. I was always in the city. I knew Max's. He said to me, and he mentioned Mickey. And I said to him, well, Jimi he was always there. He had, the Jimi and the Psychotic Frogs,
Right.
And he says to me, oh, wow, well, he got me so comfortable in this bed today. That's all that matters to me. It was just, so I came home and I told Mark, and he says to me, oh, no, the oxycodone. Just like the night your father thought he was in a bank lobby on Portion Road at 3:00 in the morning. Let's call Jimi and find out. So we called Jimi, and I'm expecting Jimi to say, no, that wasn't me. I'm like, Jimi, were you at the Veterans Home today? He's like, yeah, I'm there every day. Why? Oh, did you take care of my father? Who's your father? Al Faber. It was just a moment, Yvonne.
Wow.
It was,
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was a great man.
Thank you.
He was a great man. And it was a pleasure working with him. And, as you know, I took care of my mom at home rather than put her anywhere until she passed. And that opened my daytime gig, which Yvonne has had to work around when I've explained when I do the shows. I'm running in and out because I'm a CNA, State Certified Nurse's Aide, in the morning. And then I'm on stage in the evening with all the out there gang from the 60s and 70s when we do these shows. And I traverse both worlds, and it's interesting.
Well,
it's very interesting.
Jimi was directly responsible. I have to credit him with stopping my mother and I from making a mistake, which would have been to pull my father out of the vet's home. This was our first experience with skilled nursing care and nursing homes. We had no choice because my father was 275 pounds and had completely lost the ability to move.
Wow.
Right. So, I knew nothing about nursing homes. And so a couple of things went wrong, and I kind of flipped my wig over it. And Jimi sat me down and said, let me give you a little education about nursing homes, particularly in our geographic area. This really is kind of like the palace compared to all these other facilities. And so he was really directly responsible for sort of keeping me in line. This was... Well,
because...
It
was important. And it really is, I have to say, it really is the Ritz-Carlton of nursing homes.
It is.
But there are sometimes people that are hired there that maybe shouldn't be hired, and they eventually, and I'm sure Yvonne has dealt with people through the years that not everybody turns out to be the way you want them to be, and you separate the wheat from the chaff, or whatever the phraseology is, but that doesn't mean that you give up.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you surrender.
I think
and that's one thing that I think all of us share in common. We do not surrender.
Yeah, no.
And we find a way. Yeah.
My dad was a bar owner for many years of my growing up, and I think that's one of the reasons why he was familiar with Max's and Mickey.
Wow.
And my father was a big man. Always capable of taking care of himself. Tossed many a rowdy person out of his bars, over the years. And then here he was, flat on his back, couldn't move a muscle. And for the first time in his life, he felt very vulnerable. and afraid of people that, what they, he's doped up on painkillers to begin with. So Jimi was the calm voice of reason when I was.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Look at the serendipity of all of this. Here we are, the three of us together.
I know it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. We never know what's going to bring us together.
No, and you knew Mark before I knew Mark, Yvonne.
Yeah. I used to represent Mark.
Yes, I know. Yeah, it's so funny how we're interconnected here. It's really.
Well, that was it, because the show that you were mentioning, Susan, was Yvonne's, the Gibson Baldwin.
Right.
That was Yvonne's event.
Right.
Yeah.
That was her event. And that's when Jane joined us on stage. And
yes.
Actually, I had explained to Yvonne, because I was providing care continuously to my mom during that period. So I bolted into the city with that makeshift version of Psychotic Frogs, who turned out to be very, very good, by the way, that night. We were there, we did our set. I kissed Yvonne hello, I kissed Yvonne goodbye, back in the car, back home, because the show must go on.
Yeah.
And, it was an interesting period of time. There was a lot of that, of me wearing the nursing hat at home, running into the city and being the fabulous Jimi LaLumia, and then running back to toilet someone and feed them and remind them who they are.
Yeah.
And it builds character, I guess.
It does. I had the same situation with my mother when we did the remake of 96 Tears with you.
I remember. Yeah.
It was hard.
Yeah.
It was really, that was a challenge. Because she was here. She was here. She was at home. She wasn't, Dad had been in the nursing home. Mom was home. So it was all on me, because my brother died many years ago. He died in 99 of cancer. And so it was a challenge. It was a challenge.
But it was Mark who mixed that show.
Yes.
Mark was engineering that show. At the mixing
yes, and
board.
he was at the rehearsal. Yeah, he oversaw the rehearsal when I first put the band together. That's when we first clicked. Then we did the single, and then they came up with this idea in more recent times for LaLumia. I guess they seem to think that I talk a lot. I don't know where they got that notion from.
Well, what I've always loved, Jimi, is all of your behind the scenes stories that are rooted in history of the music business that you can't read about most of the time in a book. It's your personal experiences at Max's Kansas City with sometimes, famous people and even some not so famous people, but you've got your chunk of history that Mark and I really felt like needed to be preserved, because you can't read it in a book. It's just.
Well, I've been very honored to cross paths. I've been very honored to cross paths with history and those who helped make it, including the young lady that's our guest on this particular program.
Me too.
With Yvonne.
Me too.
Thanks so much.
and
You're welcome.
And that whole downtown scene, and so much, which is why I always make a point that Max is, and during the period that Yvonne waitressed, and then beyond that, is really where the scene that I grew to love was born. There was no underground club in America that I'm aware of that the Warhol factor, the punk factor, the Dolls and Wayne County and Holly and everything that followed, to be in any kind of way a part of that was just so exciting. And especially, as Yvonne knows, because she was there as it was happening, history was made and helped change the world culturally. Pop culture-wise, changed the world.
Nightlife forever in New York, and actually was the first, which I always say, given where we're at right now in 2020, Max's was the first place to allow transvestites and treat them with dignity and respect. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's
And then the Warhol thing obviously exploded with that, as many of them became stars. Whether in films like Hollywood Lawn or Jane County as a recording artist. Exactly. Yes, exactly. And the film stars like Bridget Berlin, who just passed, or Joe D'Alessandro, all being there, and it was like it was a once in a lifetime.
It was a one-stop shop.
Yes.
Exactly.
It was a place where everybody belonged.
Yeah.
Right? It was a place where everybody belonged.
Yes.
And so I think that's why it's still loved and thought of the way it is so many years later. And so I love that you're keeping that memory alive, Yvonne, with the foundation.
Well, thank you. And
welcome.
And I just wanted to say that the one last thing is that what is so different then as opposed to now is we are all still an extended family. I mean, the family is really still extended between all of us. And the connections that were made there are still connected for the most part in one way or another, which is very rare. I mean, I don't know of another place, maybe a little bit Studio 54, but I really don't know, Max's was the precursor to Studio 54.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the music.
Yes.
And the music.
Disco.
Yeah, of course.
And then Max's had the upstairs disco. We always say, you got dressed up to go to Studio 54, but you dressed down to go to the disco upstairs at
Exactly.
Max's, or undressed.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
And Jane Jane was a DJ upstairs at Max's.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Wayne was at the time. It was Wayne at the time. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. And and wrote a song called Max's Kansas City, which still gets played on Sirius XM. It was she said that her manager at the time, Peter Crowley, told her to write something commercial. But then she wrote the song, and he said, I didn't tell you to write a commercial. I said to make a song that's commercial, because it wound up sounding like a commercial. Because
that is very funny.
It is. It's a true story.
Yeah.
Because that's one of my favorites. But Yvonne, wonderful that you took this time out to be with us. I know we're way over time, I'm sure.
Yes, well, we're getting there. We're getting there, Jimmy.
This. I so much enjoy it, and also always, keeping the nonprofit in the public eye.
You'll have to come back and do this again soon.
I will.
So do we still have time, Susan?
I think we're going to run out in about 5 minutes or so.
So I'm going to ask Yvonne if there was one musical event at Max's that you were present for that sticks in your mind most dramatically. What would that be?
Well, I have to say, I mean, there's so many, I have to be honest with you, but the Velvet Underground, that when they did that summer at Max's, I was always enamored with Lou. I mean, to this day, I'm enamored with Lou, and that whole, so that was probably my favorite, but there were so many.
Good choice. Yeah, good choice though. Well, because they're so associated, the Velvets, with Max's. So it makes perfect sense. Well, thank you, darling.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Susan and Jim and Mark. I so appreciate it. And stay safe and well, everybody.
Yes, you too, Yvonne.
Absolutely.
Yes.
No COVID-19 for you.
No. Or anybody.
Or you too, Jimmy. No COVID-19 for you.
No.
All righty.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye, Yvonne.
Bye.
Take care, Yvonne. See you soon.
And thank you, everyone, for watching another glorious episode of LaLumiNation with the fabulous Jimi LaLumia and
the amazing Susan Faber Gaide.
See you next time.
And you got it. Arrivederci. Stay well.
And you can catch this as a podcast, by the way, before we go. You can catch this as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Absolutely. Take care.
Yes, we'll see you next time.
96 tears. tears.